anaerobic acid, or what we call pyruvate, which with the release of some energy in the form of ATP, which is called adenosine triphosphate, in the presence of enzymes and the absence of oxygen. That is. Then the next thing that occurs in glycolysis is the phosphorylation of sugars. That is the addition of phosphate group to the sugars. You know, the sugars have been broken down. Now we are adding phosphate groups to the sugar. In anaerobic respiration, breakdown proceed no further. If it is anaerobic respiration, breakdown proceed no further, and pyruvic acid is converted into ethanol and carbon dioxide in the case of plants. So if it is in plants that this anaerobic respiration is going on, the pyruvic acid is converted into ethanol and CO2. But if it is in animal, it is converted into lactic acid for storage or elimination. Then if it is in bacteria, it is converted into citric acid and oxalic acid as a byproduct. Then anaerobic respiration in plants is also known as fermentation. Fermentation is anaerobic respiration in plants. So look at this. We have glucose being catalyzed by enzyme into ethanol, CO2, and energy. So this tells you that this is anaerobic respiration in plants, because you see that it is ethanol, and I said if it is in plants it is ethanol, if it is in animal it is lactic acid, and if it is in bacteria you have citric acid and oxalic acid. So you have glucose catalyzed by enzyme into, you now have ethanol, 2 molecules of ethanol, 2 molecules of carbon dioxide, then 210 kilojoule as the energy. Then the Krebs cycle. You know, I said it's in 2 processes, glycolysis and Krebs cycle. Krebs cycle follows glycolysis. Then the pyruvic acid in the presence of oxygen, that's the aerobic process, under the influence of enzymes is oxidized into what we call acetyl coenzymes A. Acetyl coenzymes A, which is also called acetyl-CoA. Removing the enzyme to make it easily pronounced, we call it acetyl-CoA in the mitochondria of the cell. So after glycolysis has occurred, the pyruvic acid in the presence of oxygen now under the influence of acetyl-CoA in the mitochondria is oxidized. Then the acetyl-CoA is completely broken down to give carbon dioxide and water, with the production of large amount of energy, and the energy here is ATP, adenosine triphosphate. The entire aerobic respiration reaction produces a net yield of 36 molecules of ATP for each molecule of glucose. So this reaction now, this is the balanced chemical equation for this overall process. We have glucose, C6H12O6 plus 6 moles of oxygen gives 6 moles of water, 6 moles of CO2 and energy. And I said the energy is 36 molecules of ATP. Glycogen can be converted to glucose to produce energy when the concentration of glucose in the blood is low. You know, when digestion occurs, the starchy food is stored as glucose. It's broken down to glucose in the body, and the glucose is used. Sometimes it's converted into glycogen. But when the glycogen, the body is now lacking glucose, the glycogen that has been stored can be converted back to glucose to produce energy in the body. And the situation in which that occurs can be when the concentration of glucose is low in the body. For instance, when you are fasting, you are not eating, you are starving or you are hungry, glycogen in your body will be converted to glucose, at least to keep your body moving. somebody fasting, at least maybe for a day or thereabout for some hours, does not die. When you are hungry, you don't die like that, because your body is still maintained by the excess, like the glycogen that has been stored in the body being converted into glucose. Then in another process, that the concentration of hormone, adrenaline, is increased in stress. For instance, when you are under fear, or you are anxious, or you have gone through exercise, the adrenaline concentration in your body becomes increased to be able to bear that. And we also have this equation: glucose plus oxygen in the presence of enzyme giving lactic acid and 150 kilojoule of energy. And this tells you that this is a reaction that occurs in an animal, because you find lactic acid. So glucose plus 6 moles of oxygen will give you 2 molecules of lactic acid plus 150 kilojoule. That's the energy in an animal. So this is the diagrammatic representation of the Krebs cycle, from glycolysis to the splitting of sugar, then the phosphorylation, that is the addition of phosphate group to the sugar, then the glycolysis that occur, the acetyl-CoA being broken down to give CO2 and water and ATP. So, and the ATP is 36 molecules of adenosine triphosphate for each molecule of glucose. So you have that represented in this diagram. The uses of energy released during respiration. What are the energy that, after each respiratory process, either in plants or in animals? We'll now be talking of the uses of energy released during respiration. During respiration in both plant and animal, either with lactic acid or ethanol, energy is always released at the end of the reaction. Like we have 150 kilojoule, that is kilojoule of energy, 36 molecules of adenosine triphosphate. What are they used for? Okay. First, chemical energy used for metabolic acid. Chemical energy used for the metabolic activities to maintain the protoplasmic system. The energy you can use it, you can convert it to chemical energy that can be used for the metabolic activities to maintain the protoplasmic system. Also, the energy released during respiration can be like light energy converted to chemical energy that will be used for growth and tissue repair. That's another usage of that energy. Then also, it can also be used in as mechanical energy for muscular contraction, e.g. pumping of the heart. That's a form of mechanical energy. That's another usefulness. Also, the energy released in respiration can also be used as heat energy in constant body temperature of warm-blooded animal, for instance, birds and mammals. So the body temperature is maintained through the energy that is released from respiration. Another usefulness of this energy is that it can be used as chemical energy, transformed into electrical energy in the transmission of nerve impulses. Also, it can be used as sound energy for production of voice in mammals and cracking in toads and frogs. That's another usefulness. You're hearing my voice because there is a sound energy that is producing voice in me. So it could be as a result of energy that has been released during respiration. Then energy released during respiration can also be useful in cell division, which will eventually lead to the growth of the organism. Then it can also be used in the secretory activity of the gland cells, e.g. in the liver, the thyroid gland. Also, it can be used for active transport of materials in plants and animals, as in the absorption of mineral salt from the soil and selective absorption from the kidney tubules. Finally, the usefulness of energy released during respiration that we'll be mentioning now can be used in form of light energy in organisms such as glowworms and the firefly that naturally emit their lights. sometimes in the night, I don't know where you grew up from, but if you live in a place that there are bushes and you have cause to pass through at night, or you just stay around, you discover that there are some insects that move about and they show some light. You will be wondering, how did they get their light? So these organisms, that mechanism is called bioluminescence, and the light energy from respiration helps them to perform that emission of light. Now, we'll be talking about differences between photosynthesis and respiration. Differences between photosynthesis and respiration. Photosynthesis takes place in all green parts of plants only. That is, photosynthesis takes place in the presence of chlorophyll. But respiration takes place in all living parts of plants and animals. Respiration takes place in all living parts, all the parts, whether it has chlorophyll or not. Respiration takes place, and respiration takes place majorly in the mitochondria. Then, photosynthesis takes place in light. When there is no light, maybe at night, photosynthesis does not take place because it requires sunlight. But respiration takes place both in the light and in the dark. In photosynthesis, glucose is formed, but in respiration, glucose is used and is